Hi, this is Holly in another episode of Wild Blessings. And today we're going to be talking about the intentional wild garden and bringing all of the wild goodness home into your yard, onto your porch, into pots, whatever. And it's just such a wonderful way to have the wild harvest near at hand. So I think you probably have more than you realize, but what we're going to talk about today are my favorites and how I bring them to my acre. And if you don't have an acre, do the best with what you've got. If you've got 300 acres, you can go crazy. Anyway, we always start off every single class with herbing around. So I have a mullein. Look at that huge seed stalk. This is Verbascum thapsus, one of my favorites. And so I'm going to show you, I've been collecting these things and gathering their seeds. The way I do it, oh my word, look at it, it's like pepper. Is turn it upside down. All these little tight rosettes that are now the seed pods that used to be beautiful yellow flowers are filled with millions of tiny, tiny seeds that look very much like pepper. So I've got this 5-gallon bucket and I'm just herbing around by dropping the seeds into there. And this reminds me of a really happy memory I had when my kids were little. I found it was a snowy day and the snow was pure and clean and there was no footprints on it. And I found a large mullein stalk. So I cut it down and then I just kind of went in a circle with it. And all of these black seeds that you now see inside of my bucket were all over the snow. And it was just magic. So they love light germination. So this is how these tiny seeds will germinate, is with light. And so you never plant them. You just kind of spread them on the surface of the soil. But this is not a plant I would want to have growing in prime real estate. It's more of a periphery plant. So we'll talk about that when we get into our slideshow. But once you've collected these seeds, hold on, then you want to put them into a jar labeled. And this one is labeled mullein seeds. And I have a Lambsquarter jar and an evening primrose jar that I've been starting. And so I'm going to just pour these right into here. Look at all that life in there. So if you want to learn about mullein, I gave an hour-long class about mullein back in the spring, and I'd be happy to link that below in the comments. So it's an amazing gift. All of these are amazing gifts. Okay, our next thing is I just want to welcome you. I want to welcome all of my new members, some of my friends that finally joined Wild Blessings. I'm just so grateful to see you, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity to share about, to me, it's all worship, to look at the things God has created and to be able to know them from their infancy, know them from their seed, all the way up into their stalk, through the whole life cycle is really a passion to me. And to even know them by the shadows they cast and just glimpses of the plants or by their aromas and just soaking in nature using all 5 of our senses, to use your eyes to see the beauty and the textures and the leaves falling and the colors and the shadows, and using your ears to hear the birds singing and the sound of the crunching leaves, and to using your nose to smell the smells of autumn, and using your fingers to feel the textures, and just experiencing and soaking God's love in through nature from the outside in is really what we're all about here at Wild Blessings. So I hope you've had a great week, and I hope this expands your horizons and really gets you excited about bringing the wild home. So, okay, so welcome new guys. And I have a new Patreon member. Thank you so much for supporting me. I'm really excited about that. It helps me to continue to offer this class, which is my work. This is my work, and I love what I do, but it takes work, and I really would love to continue to provide it for free. And so those of you that are on Patreon, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Jason, come on over. So for our wild tea, we always start off with a wild drink. I've got dandelion root coffee, and I went ahead and I baked a apple black walnut bread, which is from black walnuts that I foraged for all over the place. And here's the black walnuts. And then these are apples that I foraged for as well up on the top of Peaceful Acres. And it was so exciting. I couldn't reach them, so I shook them. And these beautiful red globes are just falling down on top of Max and I as we...
plate there?
Yeah, this is your plate.
Oh, yes.
All right, I want to see what you think.
Okay.
Try that.
Let's see. Let me get
And this is your dandelion root coffee.
Okay, hold on, little fork.
So when you collect the root, I love to collect it in the spring or the fall, or actually since it's a perennial, anytime I'll do with dandelion. Then you just want to chop it up fine and then roast it in the oven at a low temperature for a couple hours until it's just the nice darkness and roastedness that you want, and then put it into a Vitamix or into a coffee grinder. Actually, I do a Vitamix first and then the coffee grinder to make it into grounds like this, and then you can just use it like coffee. Only it's a lot better for you, and it really is healthy for your liver. So tell me what you think of this.
I'm going to enjoy it. Like a very wonderful coffee cake.
Yeah.
Oh, it's terrific.
Well, I made it for my Bible study, so that's the only piece you can have. So anyway, do you have your friendship quotes?
Hold this, please.
Okay. So today we're going to talk about friends. There's 4 different kinds of friends. There's best friends. Are you a best friend? Oh, does he want a piece?
He does, Mom.
Oh boy, I'll give him a tiny piece. I'll give it to you because I'm not in the habit of giving him that stuff.
So he only thinks it comes from me and not from you?
That's why he only begs to you.
Because... No, well, one more piece then.
Oh, good.
He loves it. It's good.
Oh, yeah,
it's really good. Good. Am I right? Am I right?
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Bye, Max.
Now,
okay,
what about
so
those friendship
we're talking
things?
about best friends, and then we're going to talk about good friends, and then we're going to talk about friends that you kind of want boundaries and like a little bit on the periphery or a lot on the periphery, and then there's toxic friends that you really shouldn't have anything to do with. And so we're going to be talking about all 4 of those in the plant world. And but today we're only going to have time to do the best friends and the good friends. And so Jason has some friendship quotes that he's going to read, which will be interesting. Do you have the one that you made up?
Well, I could tell the one. I didn't make that one up, by the way, but there is a very often referred to quote, and that is, if you go to a social gathering like a party and you look around the room and you're the smartest person in the room, you need to find a different party.
Oh.
Because the understanding of that quote is you will grow if you spend time around people who are smarter or more knowledgeable or more skilled than you. That's part of having an attitude of learning, always learning. So,
and the plants are our teachers.
Well, I think, of course, God shows us himself through these plants. And so the plants certainly are evidence for us. They're like a schoolmaster, I suppose.
Like there's one that's similar to it.
Yeah. This one says you become like the 5 people you spend the most time with. So choose carefully. I think a lot of people ignore the fact that you are going to be influenced by the people that you spend time with. And so it is important to choose or be around or choose to try and spend time with people that you want to learn from and to even emulate. Here's another one. Tell me who your best friends are, and I'll tell you who you are. If you hang around with chickens, you're going to cluck. If you fly with eagles, you're going to soar. And I think Jesus said it best when he said, by their fruits, you'll know them. So you might be asking, well, how do I find good friends? How do I know who's a good friend? How do I know who's not a good friend? And based on what Jesus said, it is important to look at a person's life, someone that you're spending time with, someone that you think you want to spend time with, and look at the fruit, the results of their life, the results of their relationships and how they spend their time, even how they talk. So.
Okay, well, that has to do with friendships, but I'm talking about friendships with plants and which ones you want to have close to you at all times and those that you don't really need to be with at all because they will spread bad seed and you'll never get rid of them. Jason and I have been ripping up those this week, haven't we, hon? All right. So I want you in the comments, please, to write down what are your 5 favorite edible weeds. And do you have them near you, and do you know how to bring them close to home? So go ahead and write those in. And thanks to those of you that have already done that. I sure appreciate it. All right. So we're going to be talking about the intentional wild garden on a slideshow. So I'm going to go around and sit at my Jason's laptop and walk you through a little bit of that. But first, I just want you to just get out a piece of paper, and you can just take some notes of what I share. And these are just simply my favorites. They're not the only favorites. There's just so many, and it was hard for me. I certainly did not limit myself to 5. And we'll just do a couple of those. And then we're going to go and have a friend of mine share her favorite 5 edible plants. I videotaped it in an interview I did with her last week. And that'll be fun. She's an herbalist from California. And she also sent me these beautiful tangerines. She has over 100 trees on her property, and a lot of them are fruit trees. She has pomegranates. She has tangerines. Her name is Heather Pier, a good friend of mine. And so I was just thrilled when I opened this box and found all of these amazing tangerines from California. So thank you, Heather. That was awesome. Another thing I wanted to share before we get started with the video is that my mentor, Linda Runyon, she lived off the land for 13 years in the Adirondacks, and she wrote this book called The Essential Wild Food Survival Guide. And in it are 55 of worldwide most famous, popular, common wild edibles that we all have, no matter where you are in the world. And in each section, it'll tell how to cultivate that weed and how to eat it and how to use it for medicinal purposes and so forth, and if there's any toxic lookalikes. So this is a real must-have book, I think. And I went to visit her. Yes.
Would you please, while folks are listening about Linda Runyon, would you tell them what the website is that has her?
Yes, her website is ofthefield.com. And she wrote another book called Plant Identification Walks. And one of the things that made her, she really brought foraging back into the forefront, because honestly, we've been foraging since time began. And it's only been in the last a little over 100 years that foraging has gone out of vogue, and it's becoming really popular now because it's more sustainable than trying to cultivate and grow gardens and trying to get food from Argentina and whatever. And so having the food supplies that are free for the knowing and the picking around you is a really wonderful way of being prepared and being sustainable, because it's wild and it's free, and it tends, with a little bit of help, to grow on its own. That's why they're called weeds. Anyway, so she wrote a book called The Plant Identification Walks, and this book is amazing, and it goes into incredible detail on each and every plant, on how to best plant it and so forth. One of the things she did is she would have these plant walks where people would come and spend, I think they paid her $3 back in the 70s or whatever, for her to give an hour-long walk through this plant walk that she had created. And so I have never done something like that. I just have them all over my land. But I think that would be really fun. And so when I went to visit her at the retirement center, she had created a plant walk in the courtyard in the middle of the buildings, which was fascinating. And here she is teaching all the other elderly people how to eat weeds. And she was just, even in her old age, was constantly teaching and constantly eating weeds. In fact, on her windowsill in her bedroom, in her room, she was growing plantain and lambsquarters and marshmallow in little seedlings, and she would use those in her salads. And so that, I have a picture of that, but I couldn't find it. So I do have other pictures, and I'll show you that in the slideshow. But I wanted to give credit to her because she really, really is the one who got me into this many years ago. And she's in heaven now, but she was an incredible person. You can still learn from her on her website and through her books. And go ahead and join me now at my slideshow. All right.
We're like the early stages of CBS television. That's all it is.
Okay, the earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. We talked about the best friends, good friends, friends with boundaries, and toxic friends, and we will be comparing that with plants. First, I wanted to share about Linda Runyon. Ofthefield.com is her website. And this is her when she was much younger. That she did a lot of interviews, a lot of magazines, a lot of TV. She was really well known. She kind of made foraging the thing back in the day. Here's a bunch of her wonderful books. And there's, I went to visit her at the her retirement center, and I brought with me my knitting basket, and she had so much fun sitting there working with the plants and de-stemming them and deburying them and doing the kind of things that she and I always do. And so that just brought her so much life. And I also brought her a wild lunch to share, and that was really fun. Here's that little plant walk that she had created in the middle of the courtyard, and inside of her room, I don't have a picture of the little seedlings growing on the windowsill, but here's a bunch of her wild dried plants that are precious to her. And I made her a forest angel, which she was pleased with. Okay, so probably one of my favorites is an perennial called Chickweed. And Chickweed is Stellaria media. It's a spring tonic. It's loaded with vitamins, flavonoids, and blood cleansing saponins. And they love rich, moist soil. And you can grow it in full shade or part shade. You can direct seed it in the early spring, or you can grow it in pots. And it was interesting. It doesn't like warm weather. So it disappears in the summer and it returns again in the fall. But in the summer, it will go to seed. So let your chickweed go to seed and it'll come back in the fall. I have even foraged for it under the snow. And this is such an important plant to talk about that I will probably do an hour class on befriending chickweed sometime. Oh, and I love wood sorrel and I love sheep sorrel. Basically, the way to get these is just to plant a garden and they will show up. And they are also perennial greens. Dandelion is another classic spring tonic that I adore. It's a rich source of iron, vitamin C. They're so much sweeter in the spring. The whole plant has edible and medicinal uses. The root is a perennial deep taproot. And you can encourage growth by harvesting the root, but leaving a bit of it and it will continue to grow. Or you could just spread by blowing on the seed heads, these little globes, to send them flying. So I'm always carrying dandelion seeds with me and spreading them everywhere because you really cannot have enough of this amazing, nutritious, off the charts, delicious plant. Every bit of it is edible. And I have all kinds of recipes, and I've done a whole class on this as well. Oh, and I do love Lambsquarter. So it spreads really, really easily by seed. It's an annual, but it'll continue to keep coming back in the same place if you let some of it go to seed. Or you can transplant a healthy plant when it's about 6 inches tall. So over on the left is my friend Allie's garden, and she's got a species of Lambsquarter with a little red in the middle. And next year I want to get one of those and bring it over to my land so I can plant that. They're so cute. When the leaves are tender, that's when you want them. Actually, you want the meristematic, very tender growing portions, and you can just farm it all summer long. Collect the seeds for winter use. For winter supply, it's very high in protein, and also to spread the life all around. So I've been doing a lot of that lately. Violets, I do love violets. They are a perennial, and those little flowers you see on the left are not real flowers. They are just happy faces to herald spring. The actual flowers for violets come up under those leaves, the heart-shaped leaves in late summer, and are kind of like a nondescript yellow or greenish yellow. And then their seeds are really fun to watch explode. I can send you, I'll put in the comments below how to watching a violet seed pod expose project the seeds like a little explosion. Anyway, there's so much deliciousness about a violet, so much nutrition that I really would never want to be without it. And honestly, they grow best in a woody situation, and they love kind of moist, rich soils. And they just are such joyful. This is jelly I made out of the violets. And I love to decorate. I love to put them in ice cubes. I have some ice cubes in my freezer with violets in them right now. Okay. And marshmallow. Oh my word. This is such Althea officinalis has a rich history of being used as a food source. Very important plant for civilizations throughout the centuries. Whoops. Don't want to do that. It likes full sun. It does enjoy kind of wet, marshy areas, but it doesn't like to sit in water. It's a very important food source. Even the root is what the marshmallow that we have today that we make s'mores with and stuff, that came from the marshmallow root, which is very gelatinous and has a mucilaginous feel to it. And so I've made that into marshmallows, and we made our own s'mores one time, and it was so fun. I'll put pictures in the comments. Whipping that up, a crucial source of survival food. I'll never forget Linda telling me she was watching, I think it was during the Gulf War, she was watching the news, and there were these children that were starving to death, and the people were eating their dogs. And right there on the video of the newscast was a huge stand of a marshmallow plant. And marshmallow is in the same family as okra. And so these little seed pods that you can see there taste very, very much like okra. And they're called little cheese wheels. That's what Linda calls them. And they're super tasty, have a great chew factor. The leaves are delicious. You can use them like a tortilla. The flowers are tasty in salads. The whole plant has amazing medicinal purposes, extremely healthful for the colon and for gut health. Plantain is kind of like the first aid plant of all of the plants. And gosh, it kind of goes, you can't really not, you have it, I'm sure, on your land. It likes to be where people walk. And you can make kale chips out of the leaves. You can eat the seeds, and which are wonderful. Psyllium husk is what that really is. And so you can put that into your smoothies or in your stews and make all kinds of wonderful food with plantain. But it's most especially a Band-Aid for medicinal purposes. So if you get stung by a bee, what it's most famous for is being used as a spit poultice to pull out the toxins and to pull the stinger even out of your finger. So even within minutes, less than a minute, you will feel complete relief by using plantain. So much to say about this incredible plant. And then milkweed, I couldn't live without that. I'm constantly spreading milkweed seeds. So now that it's milkweed seed season, I would be collecting as many of them as you possibly can and then spreading them where you want them. It's a perennial green, so never take more than a third. Don't ever over harvest because if you take too many of the shoots, which I'm getting on the top left-hand picture, then you won't have the buds or the flowers or the seed pods. And if you take too many of the buds, which are in the top right-hand picture, which look like broccoli and taste very similar to that, then you won't have flowers or seed pods. And if you take too many of the seed pods, then they won't go to seed. So it really has to do with being sustainable in the way in which you harvest, but most especially bring it to your land. And also the monarch butterflies, this is the only thing that they eat is milkweed leaves. They're caterpillars. So it's really, really important to nurture that. I think that foragers are more interested in sustainability than anyone else because we value and appreciate the time-tested, low-impact sustainability of all these natural resources. So we're deeply concerned about these plants and how to harvest them and how to keep them coming back. Okay, nettle. These are super high in all kinds of nutrition, so delicious. They're a perennial that spreads by runners and underground rhizomes. And it's really hard to over-harvest these once a colony is established. So you can get a little starter from somebody who has a nettle patch, which is what I did from Betty Thomas years ago. And now I have a huge nettle patch. But here I am collecting them on the left and making nettle soup on the right.
Yeah, but you don't want to be all that close to nettle, do you? Because, boy, they sting. Do you really?
Yeah, well, I'm wearing gloves, if you can see that.
So you got to put them someplace where you're not walking all the time, maybe.
Yeah, however, there's a lot to be said about that. Nettle in, dock out, and it's not that big of a deal getting stung. So there's ways to deal with that, and we'll do a whole class on nettle. But Urtica dioica is a must, and so I wouldn't necessarily put it in prime real estate, but I would put it more towards the peripheral. Purslane is another incredible gift. high in omega-3s and 6s, and it's like a succulent, and makes great pickles. Jason loves purchasing pickles, and it's really crunchy in salads. And Portulaca oleracea is really great with scrambled eggs, and the nutrition is so incredible. I'll never forget collecting a ton of this during a drought when there hadn't been rain in months, and yet the weeds were thriving. In particular was purslane, so full of moisture. So I can't have enough of that. Ramps, these are amazing. They're called wild leeks. They're kind of a cross between garlics and onion. They're a spring ephemeral, which means they only come up for a short time in the spring. And when you're harvesting them, cut the top part off and replant the part with the root hairs so that you can prevent the population from declining. It takes 7 years to get a bulb to the point where it's a full ramp bulb. So if you just pull it out and don't put the root hairs back in, then you'll have depopulated you want that to continue and sustain. So you can bring up by the roots, bring up the whole bulb and put them on your land. And I've done a lot of that. And now I have quite a bit of ramps. So I don't actually harvest them on my acre because I have lots of places nearby where I go, but I'm trying to cultivate their growth here at Deer Crossing. Elderberries, these are so easy to propagate with branch cuttings. So find someone who has healthy elderberries. I've got plenty of them, happy to share. I gave some to Elizabeth Hankins this year. And you just cut them and put them into the soil so that where the leaf scar is then becomes like roots underneath the soil. And I did that all over the mountain, and I probably started about 20 new elderberry trees this year, and they just did great. So of course, not only do you get the berries, but you get the beautiful flowers, and we did a whole class on elderflower and elderberries. So super good for flu season, for building your immune system, and so tasty. And burdock is one of my favorites. And so, whoops, I forgot to change the wording at the bottom, but burdock has so many gifts to it. You don't want to eat the leaves because those are disgusting. They have medicinal purposes, but you can eat the stems, and you can eat the crowns, and you can eat the roots, which are famous in Japan. They're called gobo. You can buy them for $20 a pound at Whole Foods. You can do a lot with burdock, and I have quite a bit of this. I would freeze it, or I would, after you've chopped it and decocted it, or you could dry it to reconstitute later. But these seeds, the way I would spread this is I would just collect those seeds, and I would put them where you want them, and they will propagate nearby wherever you place those seeds. So they're the best to leave in the seeds out now so they can go through the cold stratification and scarification of the winter. You want to mimic nature's cycles. Queen Anne's lace, I love that as well. And you probably all have this on your land. The way to tell the difference between Queen Anne's lace and some of the poisonous lookalikes is Queen Anne always has that little bit, not always, but most of the time has that little red dot in the very center. And that is supposedly the queen was tatting lace and she pricked her finger and there's a little bit of blood in the middle. This is what carrots were cultivated was from Daucus carota, the wild carrot. And so you can also eat the roots in the first year plant, not the second year, because by then it's just they're just there to hold up the rest of the plant as it goes to seed. And the seeds also have edible purposes. Evening primrose is something else that I really wouldn't want to be without, Oena therabiensis. And this is so easy to propagate with seeds as well. It too is a biennial. So the first year you'll have on the left-hand side just a rosette like that. And that's when you want to gather the root, which is edible. I've never enjoyed eating the leaves, although they are edible. And then when they go in the second year into the flower stalk, those flower buds are so delicious, and the flowers are super tasty and beautiful. And then even the early seed pods can be used for food. So I love evening primrose. And I don't think you can have enough wild daylilies because you can eat their flower buds. They're beautiful, crunchy, sweet flowers. Taste very much like sugary lettuce, actually, and they're delicious tubers. So the way you would divide those is you would just divide up those tubers and spread them, put them where you want them on your land. And they do tend to be a little bit invasive, but frankly, they're so beautiful and they provide so much food. It's a wonderful thing to have around. And then sumac grows wild rush glabra. You can make sumac-ate out of it, really high in vitamin C, high in tannins. Gosh, I never changed any of these words on the left, so don't look at those. Anyway, I love this plant. And the way you can propagate this is by transplanting early in the spring one of the small rhizomic roots that are constantly growing in colonies away from the mother plant. So it's easy to break one of those off and then transplant it where you'd like it. Or this is so prolific here in the high country, you could just go to a destination if you'd like, but they're so pretty and they last throughout the winter and they're great for birds as well. All right, so on the periphery. So here's some that, whoops. Like I love wild mustard, but you really wouldn't want to have this in prime real estate because it is so invasive, and but all parts of it are edible, and we spend money and we take time to grow kale. So this is wild and it grows wild and it taste is full of, it's probably highest in nutritious in all of the plants, and all of it all as mustards are edible and all parts of the plant are edible. And then with mints, I wouldn't put those close to your house either because they tend to cross, and they tend to just get out of control. So if you wanted to keep them nearby, you could put them in pots to kind of keep their root system in check a little bit. And you don't want to put them near each other. So here's peppermint and catnip and spearmint and Melissa, which is lemon balm and self-heal. And if you have the mints near each other in the Lamiaceae family, they will cross-pollinate. And so it's best to have peppermint in one corner of your yard and catnip in another and spearmint in another so that they can kind of keep their purity. But mints are such a gift, and they're so powerful for so many medicinal purposes as well as delicious teas. And I do love yellow dock. So when I'm looking at yellow dock, I'm thinking of bread or crackers. And I'm also thinking of their roots and the high in iron. So you can make an iron tonic out of that. And so these are really also invasive. So having them nearby is great, but not necessarily in your garden. Blackberries are another amazing gift, but I would certainly not want them on my land because they just are all over the place up here. And so I would rather go to a place where I could forage them that's nearby and or at least on the periphery of my land. And we did a lot of talk of that earlier in July, if you want to look at that class. Autumnala berries are my favorite berries of all time. They're kind of a cross between a cranberry and a raspberry, but they're incredibly invasive. And so I don't know. Some states it's illegal to even plant them, but one of the things I do with this is I just take a branch, I call it branching out, and I put it where I'd like it to take over and then just pray that it will. Or you could transplant. And then amaranths also, you want to have these nearby because they're so high in protein, but they have such huge root systems that you don't want those in your garden either, but they are really delicious. And here they're like quinoa, and here I am on the right-hand side popping those seeds. And of course, Jerusalem artichokes. Jason and I planted a whole bunch of those all over the mountain this week, but we don't want them in your garden either because they take over. I know. Okay. Making a hedgerow at my sit spot and storing a winter supply of Jerusalem artichokes in soil for the winter. And poke, I love poke, but man, there's just so much to say about this plant. It kept the South alive during the Civil War. It's one of my favorite, most delicious plants, but you also don't want to have this in your prime real estate. Oh my gosh, comfrey, gosh, I couldn't live without that either. But this one is the same thing. When you plant comfrey somewhere, you might as well just forget it because it'll stay there for the rest of eternity. So think carefully about where you plant it. And the best way to transplant this one is with the roots. So I would definitely Ask a friend who has comfrey for some roots and then plant it in the far corner of your land. And it does like sun. All right. Well, we'll do destination and then toxic plants next week. But that's just, those are good friends, best friends and good friends, section 1 and 2. All right. Let me go back over here. All right. So we're going to get ready to watch. Are you ready? We're going to get ready to watch Heather Pier, my herbalist friend. She's also a veterinarian, and was an actress. She's quite the accomplished woman. She had a restaurant where she would serve a lot of her wild foods, and she edited a magazine for foragers, which was incredible. So I'll give you a link to that in the comments below. But she's going to share with us now what are her top 5 favorite plants that she would want to have nearby. And so let's listen to Heather. All right, we have Heather Pier back with us again. Last week, she shared with us how foraging was such a huge part of her life because her grandmother and mother foraged during the occupation of France of the Germans, and that's what kept them alive during such a difficult time. So that gave her an interest in foraging, and she's one of my foraging buddies. So I was thrilled to have her story. And if you want to hear more of that, go back and listen to last week's class. But this week, she's sharing with us the plants that she thinks that everyone needs to have on their land, or at least the ones she appreciates having. And fortunately, it's the time of year when the seeds are out and we can collect seeds or we can transplant the whole plant. But be intentional and take seriously the things that we share with you today so that you can develop your own wild garden. So Heather, take it away, hon.
So I'm a big fan of oak trees. I live in California. We have almost 24 species of oak trees, and every single one of those acorns are edible. Some of them take more processing, some of them take less processing. It depends on if it's a red, black, or white species. But nonetheless, they are the biggest bang for your buck. And obviously, history shows that to be true. Our Native Americans here relied heavily on the acorn. There are others. Obviously, this is California. Your mileage is going to vary, but every place is able to grow some sort of fruit trees. Even in Montana, in spots, you would see the very delicate apricot tree. You can grow fruit trees, some sort of fruit trees, anywhere in the lower 48, no matter what your state is. You can always dry fruit. You can make any kind of a sauce out of them. You can bake it into pies. It has so much versatility. Cattails, nettles, dandelion, nettles, lambsquarters. What else? Any sort of nut tree. Again, we have a lot of almonds here. Many of them are bitter, but many of them are sweet. But to go out foraging on the old homesteads, you'll find a lot of black walnuts. You'll find a lot of English walnuts. You'll find a lot of apple trees. Look for old homesteads. See what they've got on their places. Watercress. Find a good stretch of clean water if you can. If you can't, make sure that you wash everything. Learn to preserve.
Can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
So today, I thought of you. I was hiking up on the top of Peaceful Acres Mountain, which is where Mom used to live.
I remember.
There was this old farmhouse that had burned down at the very top of that mountain, and the only thing left were 2 chimneys. And I love to go up there because, first of all, it gives me an amazing view of my mountain because it's like a mile away as far as the crow can fly. But it's, anyway, it gives a great view of the mountains. And around that homestead that is no longer there, just the chimneys, are at least 8 apple trees and pear trees and crab apple trees. And no one lives there anymore, but all of those trees keep giving their gifts.
Exactly.
And so
exactly.
It was really fun being up there. And it's right above the hickory grove. So I got a whole bunch of hickory nuts. Have you ever had hickory nut coffee?
I have not. We don't have hickory nuts here, so I've never had a hickory nut.
Well, when you come to visit me, I'll make you some.
Okay. All right.
Okay, go back to your story.
So the important thing is, and I can a lot. I preserve a lot. I dry a lot. I'm very fortunate that I live in California right now. I don't have a hard winter. I have lived my whole career in Montana, so I do understand hard winters, and I do understand snow above your head and not being able to get out and having enough put aside to carry you through that winter. And I found that through the trick that there are tricks to eating the same thing over and over, and that's the bright spots like learn to preserve lemons. That little bit of brightness in a bowl of rice in the wintertime can bring so much meaning to your life. I take my pomegranates and I make syrup. So in a winter time where maybe because I've never lived in a place where I could tap maples like you do, but maybe a little bit of pomegranate syrup on a dry old pancake in the winter might, is a huge bright spot, because it's not just food that we need. We need to brighten our souls, and we can do that with plants. And you do that every day. I know you do that every day when you go up and see the sunset. It's hard in the wintertime when you're eating the same 6 foods day in and day out and day in and day out. So you learn to put things aside that will help brighten up those days. And some people, I'm sure you do a lot of it with prayer. I'm not a big prayer. My mind tends to not be anywhere but where it's supposed to be on prayers. So I tend to brighten it in other ways. I'm always thankful. I'm always thankful for whatever I have. I may not be able to articulate that in a prayer, but I think by taking a plain bowl of rice and spicing it up with a little bit of lemon in the hardest days of winter is truly a gift and something to say thank you for.
Amen.
So find those things that make you happy, that will help you live through a bland diet. Because if you are, and granted, there's lots of different types of people who prepare. There are people who prepare by buying a lot of things. They buy the very expensive freeze-dried stuff. They have a 4-year supply and it's all in little packets. That's not me. It's really not me. I've gone to the trouble of storing some flour and some dry goods and some rice, that sort of thing. But by far the majority of what I will be living on, if the need ever came, is what I can find out there. And I think a lot of people are like that. We have a backbone that we will depend on, and then we will of supplies, and then we will add to that.
Right, but this is the time to learn what there is to eat for free.
Exactly.
Because there are some poisonous plants out there. I was just over at the where was I? At Big Hill, Green Valley Park, and they have poison hemlock.
Mm-hmm.
And even though the flower's gone and everything, and it's the fall, I could still recognize it, but other people might not know. And
of course,
so it's important to know with the few plants that are poisonous, and it's important to know which ones are really tasty and edible, which is why I do my class on wild blessings every week.
So let's take mushrooms for an example. So there are a multitude of mushrooms, more and more and more that I could ever identify. And people are always calling me and asking me, well, what's this mushroom? And I am at the point in my life where I'm hesitate to do any idea, because I feel like, or any mushroom, because I feel like people don't listen anymore. And you say, this is what that is. It can give you a stomach ache, and they don't pay any attention, and they feed their 3-year-old. And I don't want to do that. I stick with 6 types of mushrooms. They are mushrooms that I know without a shadow of a doubt that I cannot mix them up with anything else. If my eyes go bad, the lion's mane, the morel, the inky mushroom, my mind's gone hen of the woods and chicken of the woods. Those are 5. There's a couple more in there. There's a bolete. What else is there? But those are the ones, even if my eyesight is fading, even if I'm old, I can't get around, I know those ones. Those are without a doubt. There's nothing that I can mix them up with. I know them so well. And I recommend that everybody find those 6 plants or those 6 mushrooms or those 6 whatever it is that they know beyond a shadow of a doubt, that they can recognize from any other plant. And those will get you through.
Can you give me your favorite foraging book that you recommend people purchase?
I don't have one.
You don't have one.
Sorry.
You probably have 20.
I have probably more than that. I probably have 30 or 40, but
Yeah.
and
You don't have
none of
one
them are
that's your
bad.
favorite.
I don't have one that's my favorite. No.
Okay.
Because I've learned one plant here and one plant there. If I could recommend that somebody did something, step out your back door. Step out your back door, find the first plant that you come to, even if it's this big, and identify it. You don't have to have a book. There's so much resource online right now. You don't have to have a book to start off with. Don't go out and spend money if you don't need to right now. And the internet, while we have it, if we have it forever, that's awesome, is a fabulous. But the first thing to start doing is learning how to identify. And you have to understand botany in a day. You have to understand the leaf shape, the type of flowers that are on there, what the edges are like, where it's found, what the reproductive parts are, the leaf shape, how many leaves are there. So botany in a day, I think, will give you more benefit to start out with than any other book.
Yeah, I'm going to be teaching that next year. So I taught it a couple of years ago, and it was fabulous. And boy, if you know those 7 or 8 families, I think it's 8. You're just set. It's just so great.
That it'll make your life so much easier.
And it honestly makes me feel like I am really, really not just really connecting with God and the one who created these things, but with my ancestors, because all of our ancestors used to know all of these plants. It was common sense. And they lived, they would bring over dandelion seeds in the hems of their clothing.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
and you do have to go quite a bit back. Yeah.
What?
You do have to go quite a bit back for many people to get to that. It isn't like the last 2 or 3 generations, and I'm very fortunate to have had that. But most people whose family came from industrialized Europe probably haven't. Their ancestors, it's been more than 2 or 3, or maybe even more than 5 or 6 generations who of the ancestors who did that. We really have lost so much.
You know what really struck me is I have all these shopping centers all over the high country. Because like it's crazy. I'll be driving. I know exactly where this tree is and what I'm looking for. And sometimes I've lost them. Like I've lost maybe 5 or 6 shopping centers because it gets clear cut, or because the farmer moved and now the new person doesn't know me or whatever. And so I always feel so bereft when I lose a shopping center.
I agree.
It really made me think about how the Native Americans must have felt when the settlers are coming in and taking their land, and they didn't have this feeling of this is my land. It was like it's all of our land. But those oak trees that they would go to every year, and the hawthorn groves and the elderberry groves, all of a sudden now that belongs to somebody with a shotgun, you know. And it's like, wow, that must have been really heartbreaking to lose some of those hunting grounds, not just for animals but for plants.
I think about walking out, how they must have walked out when hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of buffalo had been killed and slaughtered and just their tongues taken. I mean, how could you deal with that? The waste and the wanton and the absolute disrespect. It's hard for me.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, this has been so interesting. Thank you so much.
This has been fun.
Yeah, I'm going to continue now with our class, and I'll be sharing my favorite plants that I think y'all need, and I'll show you the seeds that you can identify now and how they can be easily gathered. And you want to spread them now because of the scarification and what's the other one? Scarification and it's not sanctification. What is it?
Germination?
No, stratification.
I'm not sure what's your stratification.
Stratification meaning the cold and then the hot.
Right, and the scarification.
Scarification meaning getting nicked and so forth.
Yeah.
And so if you get those seeds out now, then nature will do its thing. And one thing I love about weeds is you don't really have to cultivate them. They just kind of grow on their own.
Exactly. And now certainly is the time. This is my go-to time for planting poppies, which is one of my big medicinal herbs. But they like the winter temperatures. They like being that cold, and they'll come up much more reliably if you plant them right now.
I forgot to mention that you do also make your own medicines, and that's also
I do.
Yeah. Awesome.
And I don't want anybody to get me wrong. If I get hit by a car, of course I'm going to the emergency room. Excuse me, I've got a frog. But I do. If there's something, a cough syrup, I make my own cough syrups. I mean, you can get it at CVS or you can get it on my refrigerator. Which is it going to be? I have salivary gland issues, and I found that like very sour, making a sour sort of lemon candy does just as much for me as any medication that a doctor can go. There's so many things that we can do at home. And a lot of times herbs do take longer. And that's why we go to the drugstore, because those medicines are chemically made to work much quicker. But sometimes I don't need to go quicker. I can take the slow route and be much happier. So.
Well, and also the slow road is actually sometimes addressing the root problem and
certainly
causing
other conditions,
actual healing, and not just stopping the symptom. So that I really deeply respect that. But what I love about you is that you are a vet, so you really understand the allopathic. I mean, you get it both. You get all of it. So I think that's a really great package. Okay, hon, thank you so much.
All right, dear. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, so that's my friend Heather, and next week she'll be sharing, I've already recorded it, but I'll play it for next week. She'll be sharing how her mother and grandmother stayed alive during the Second World War because of foraging. And so that's a really fascinating story. All right, just briefly, I've got my nature slideshow to show you. I do that every week where I show you the little adventures I went on, the foraging I did, the cooking I did, and then the stillness and the celebrating beauty of the season. And because foraging is so highly seasonal, I think it's fascinating to see what's on nature's stores now as compared to even last week or the week before, certainly last month. And this was fascinating to me. This here is a witch hazel flower. And so this is probably the only flower I know of that actually blooms in November. And so that's pretty exciting. And then their seed pods expel like a bullet, and they make a lot of noise when they do. And so that's coming up. So I'm going to be keeping my eyes on my witch hazel bushes because I've never seen that happen, and it's on my bucket list. But I wanted to show you that. And I have one more thing to say before I turn it over to the slideshow. And that is that when you're out absorbing nature and enjoying God's creation and looking for what to harvest to fill your basket with, remember, we look to you to give us our food in due season. You give to us and we gather it up. So I want to challenge you not just to look down to see what there is around your feet, but to look up. So I was looking up today and I saw an enormous amount of grapes, just clusters of wild grapes high up in the trees. And I'm not a monkey, so I wasn't going to climb the trees, and Max doesn't know how to climb. So I just thought, I wonder how I can get those. And then I looked down and there were all of these grape clusters all amongst the dead dying leaves on the ground. And so I just picked them up. And so last week I did the same thing, and I made some grape juice, and I put that into my applesauce that I made, and I gave to my friend Pamela. So they're still tasty. They're really sweet. They're kind of a little bit raisin looking, but make sure you look up as well as down and sideways. But keep your eyes alert and open for every gift hidden in plain view, because God comes to us each day. He wants to bless us each day, and he wants to fill our hearts and our baskets with his love. So enjoy my slideshow, and then we'll say some comments about what's coming up next week. Okay. All right. So that was our virtual hanging around with Holly. We'll continue with the Wild Intentional Garden next Tuesday. And Heather's survival story that we talked about. I guess that's it. I really appreciate you joining me. I'm sorry we had technical difficulties, but that's just life. And I appreciate my husband for all you do for me, Jason. Thank you so much. And I'm looking so much forward to seeing what you guys consider to be your top 5 favorites. So please comment on that. And I will be putting all of those that do comment on your top 5 favorite weeds. Yes.
You know what? We're broadcasting all over the world from our kitchen.
Well, I know there's someone in England.
Anybody
Hi,
around the
Jamie.
world can tune in to Teaching Tuesdays and Wild Blessings. And so I want to encourage all of you to share these broadcasts. And if you see them on YouTube,
Yeah.
please go to YouTube.
Subscribe.
And if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Wild Blessings YouTube channel. And because, as she mentioned, this is her full-time work. And I got to tell you, I'm here all the time. She and I work together here from home in our different sort of worlds, but we work to help and support each other. And so if you can help support her work, you can do it on Patreon. Go to patreon.com and look for Wild Blessings. And we sure would support anybody who wants to or appreciate anybody who wants to support her. And you can give just a little bit each month. And boy, it adds up, but it really is a good way to continue to help make this class free.
Okay. God bless you guys. Thanks for joining me.